The Tale of Tales. A couple of years ago, I really wasn't sure just where my life was going, so I took a flight out to Egypt with the idea of doing some walking in the desert, maybe a spot of thinking. But any hopes I had of getting some peace of mind were dashed by my choice of guide, Ahmed. Ahmed was a nosy, talkative, irritating man who never stopped moaning about the trials and tribulations of being a poor desert guide. While we were walking through these majestic canyons and resting in these beautiful palm tree oases, and then sleeping under the dazzling starry sky of the desert night, Ahmed just couldn't shut up about how he depended on the generosity of foreign tourists just to make ends meet. And finally, I had to say to him, as politely as I could, that perhaps guides were better seen than heard. Ahmed, of course, fell into an instant sulk, muttering to himself all day and shooting me dark looks. But by this point, I really couldn't care less. I was just so happy to, finally get some peace of mind and have a great day walking. So we made 20 miles that day without a word from my guide, and in the evening we came to some caves to take shelter for the night. And while Ahmed tried to coax a fire out of some branches and leaves in the mouth of the cave, I went deeper in with my torch to make sure there were no wild animals inside. And whereas I didn't find any wolves or bears, what I did see took my breath away. As I shone my torch across the walls of the caves, I saw ancient cave paintings. And that would have been amazing enough in itself. But there was a detail in the paintings that made my jaw drop. The people in the paintings had tails. And not tails like a monkey or a cat might have, but big, thick, crusty things, more like a reptile. And they sat with their tails coiled beneath them, high up, while others, without tails, fed them food and drink on the end of long poles. So, well, Ahmed, have you seen this? Were these paintings made by people who used to live here? Did they really have tails? Ahmed looked up from where he was blowing into the fire and said, "Guides should be seen, not heard." Well, I went to take my seat by the fire, and I could see in Ahmed's face that he was torn between wanting to maintain his sulk on one hand and wanting to impress me on the other with how much he knew about the area and, of course, thereby increase his chances of a good tip. Well, finally, he couldn't help himself, and he said, Yes, they were made by those who lived here long ago. And yes, they had tails. Not everything your scientists are knowing. Their tails were like the lizard. They fell off. But not when they were running away. No. Their tails fell off when they did or said something wrong. Something dishonorable. Their tails fell off from the very shame. I said, but not everyone in those paintings had tails, so who is telling the story? So yes, there was born a generation so evil, so sinful, they could not go 5 minutes without lying or stealing or cheating or thinking something wrong. So their tails never grew at all. Next to them, those with tails felt even more honorable, even more pure. and they started sitting up on their tails, high in the sky. And the one who sat the highest was the purest of all. But pride comes before the fall. One day they snapped their fingers for service. There was no answer. They called down to their slaves for their breakfast. No one came. The tailless sinners had run away in the night to leave their masters to starve. One by one, they tried to get down. One by one, they fell to their death. And that is why we are descended from a race of evil, tailless sinners. And that is why the world is in such a terrible state, where even a poor desert tour guide couldn't hardly feed his family. Ahmed got his tip. I mean, he deserved it. Not that I believed a word of his story, mind you. But somehow, even if he had made the whole thing up, somehow there was still something true in the tale.